Dave Olson says, with Vladimir Putin's recent kickassery in the Middle East, is there any way that America can recover from our loss of face? Absolutely, Dave. That's what Americans do. We recover from our loss of face and our shame. You know, the history of American foreign policy is a series of appalling blunders corrected by remarkable bouts of steadfast heroism, which leads to a kind of stability and a complacency, and the next thing you know, bam, we're in it again. I think the best way to think about American foreign policy, it stung when I heard it, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was true, and it's certainly true today, was from, I think the greatest man who ever lived. That's Winston Churchill. He said, you can always depend on Americans to do the right thing after they have exhausted every other alternative. That's us in a nutshell, really, I think, And it's not malicious. It's just, I don't know. When I think about Iraq being won, was it 4 months, 5 months without a single American casualty in the year before handing over power to Barack Obama? And then Obama riding for 2 or 3 years on the war that George Bush won after really making some serious mistakes, but then coming by and seeing the light and getting ahead of all that stuff. To have a war won at that kind of cost in terms of lives lost, and then watch it just be basically pissed away by, I used to think it was by incompetence, but we all know now it's by intent. That the Democrats are the party that runs against winning wars. We won in Vietnam. We won in Vietnam because Vietnam started when the North invaded the South, and when the shooting stopped, the North was back behind the same line they were behind in the beginning, and South Vietnam was a legitimate independent republic. And 2 years later, the Congress decided to pull the security agreement we had with South Vietnam, and the North poked a little bit. Next thing you know, they take it over, and 7 million people killed because of Democrats. And the same thing with Iraq. It was won, was paid for in blood and treasure, and then, well, we ran on it being a catastrophe, so now we'll have to make it a catastrophe, right? That's it. It's really hard to watch. And I don't want to get into too many details, but certainly one of our constant and perpetual viewers and a friend of mine is intimately associated with what we're doing over there. And watching Russia come in guns blazing is into an area that really has been our area, one of our many areas of influence, is hard. And I'll tell you what's even harder. It's harder for me to listen to Vladimir Putin say things that should be said by the President of the United States. I don't like the fact that occasionally I will find myself momentarily rooting for this mass murderer named Putin because he says things like, we are going to go in there and we're going to protect the Christians in the area against these murdering savages. Isn't that our job? Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? Isn't that the job of the President of the United States? Now I know that, look, Putin's not doing it for that reason. But when Vladimir Putin says, basically, hey, we don't need immigrants. Immigrants need Russia. If they want to come to Russia and live by our laws, that's great. If they don't, they can go back to the hellholes that they came from. Perfectly clear, morally sound, defensive of his own culture, protective is a better word, pride in his civilization. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? Instead of the future does not belong to those who insult the Prophet of Islam, says the President of the United States of America at the United Nations. Really? I thought that's what this whole thing was about. I thought the whole purpose of this place was that I'm supposed to be able to say what I want to and think what I want to and say what I want to. And now you're telling me that the future belongs to those people who do not insult the Prophet of Islam. I think the Prophet of Islam is a jackass. What do you think about that, Mr. President? So who does the future belong to? Them? Yeah, we know. We know what side he's on. We know what side he's on. We do. I have this bizarre wish, and it's a fantasy fulfillment. It's wishful thinking. I criticize wishful thinking all the time. This is wishful thinking on my part. Doesn't make it any less fun. I have a wish that when he leaves office, the narcissism of the man, the raw narcissism, when the spotlight moves to the next president and he's out of the spotlight after 8 years of being in the spotlight, my wish fulfillment is that he will come out and say, oh, and by the way, I am a Muslim, have been the whole time. and I was born in Seattle or whatever. And my dad is Frank Marshall Davis. And all the things that we know to be true, he just admits to, just as a final stick, just a final poke in this country that he hates so much. I don't think it's going to happen, but I wish it would. Just because I'd like to see the faces of people. And listen to them basically say, well, what difference does it make if he was a Muslim? Because he is. He is. He grew up in Indonesia. Those were his, they say that your entire ethics system is determined by the time you're 5 or 6 years old. I mean, this guy was in Indonesian Muslim schools at 5, 6 years old and grew up in them. Of course he is. Every time there's a comment, every time when Islam is the culprit, he says nothing. When Christians are being called out, are you a Christian? Yes, shot in the head. When Muslims are standing up screaming Allahu Akbar, shooting people in Paris or shooting people here, nothing. Except occasionally when he's called out, he'll say, well, let's not forget that Christianity has its excesses too. I know what side he's on. And there are sides. So there you go. We'll recover our loss of face eventually, or we won't. We'll either lose our military might and standing in the world, or we'll get it back. And if we get it back, then we'll undo the damage we did at more cost in money and time and lives, and we'll have a period of respect and stability. And the worse it gets, how do I want to say this? The worse it gets, the longer it'll last, right? If it turns into a big, nasty, bloody shooting war, then we'll win that war. Because we are unbeatable. When we are on our game, when we're all here, when we're all awake, we're unbeatable. I believe this to this day. China does not scare me in the slightest. What scares me is Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and progressivism, and Bernie Sanders scares me. I'm not worried about the Chinese. And as far as ISIL's concerned, that is a weekend problem for us. ISIL's a weekend. ISIL's a busy weekend if we put our backs into it. And I don't mean like suppressed or contained. I mean destroyed. Done. That's a weekend. So that's always a consolation. The big consolations for me are we're the side that has the guns in terms of us versus the progressives, and the consolation for me is in terms of American military might is the world has not seen the United States angry since August of 1945. So you can take your Vietnam, you can take your Korea, you can take your 9/11, you take your Gulf War, take your Iraq War, all the rest of it, and that's fine. But the world has not seen us fully angry and fully engaged since August of 1945, and you can ask the Japanese how that goes. So moving on.